the meantime, let's look at the future of robotics. Zeno Mercer is with us, Senior Research Analyst at VettaFi. So robotics on the mind, and we have the ROBO ETF. Why are robotics so important today? Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at robotics as a more traditional industry servicing industrial automation. And that's where, let's be real, the majority of revenue for robotics currently comes from. The humanoids and these new form factors really are, at the effectively 0% market adoption. So in terms of the importance of robotics, let's take a step back and look at some of the fundamental factors of society right now. High debt, high inflation, people can't afford to live. There's a lot of things that need to be improved upon, and the current way of solving things isn't working. Thankfully, artificial intelligence is increasing simulations, training capabilities, and you're able to, upload that across a fleet of robots. You don't have to hire a workforce, and with an aging population and labor shortages and all these different macro globally environment demanding this, we're finally at the point where robotics can grow into what people had been envisioning since even the 60s with shows like the Jetsons.
And so at this point now, how does the Robo ETF really cover this to really get people exposure to this growth?
I mean, look, Robo's been around since 2013 as the world's first robotics index, covering global blue chip players on infrastructure and applications. So we have, and it continue to evolve, rebalance quarterly, adding companies that have exposure to these things. Humanoids, as I mentioned, very early stages, not really meaningful revenue contribution, though you are seeing some high valuations there. The real story here is that you're going to be entering a bot making bot world. Robots will be making robots, and those robots are going to be transitioning to not just CapEx related investments, but more OpEx. That's in services, that's in domestic households. We're looking at several trillion-dollar industries appearing for robotics that didn't exist before. So that's going to be a rising tide for sensors, actuation and control systems, power and infrastructure. We're already seeing data centers and electrification driving a lot of demand and EPS and sales revisions upwards this year. Reshoring, of course, is not just a US story, that is global. We're seeing more manufacturing production coming online in India, Vietnam, Mexico, all over the world as we see domestic resilience, national security risk in focus there. So Robo really does get exposure to these companies that are providing, the core, robotic arms, but also different form factors of warehouse automation, logistics technology, next generation mobility. So even like flying cars and other things that are starting to come online. So it's diversified focus into blue chip global leaders, companies like Foxconn and Celestica, which are expanding their end markets and seeing margin expansion by working on AI server production and things like that. And they're adding humanoids. So even within highly automated industries that people associate with robotics, there's lots of run rate and increased adoption left for increased automation of those industries.
And excuse me, when we look at the names that are in the Robo ETF, you also have the Mag 7 investments into robotics, right? So it's not going to be all names that we never heard of. You do have some really big names that are very obvious to folks, right? Can you name some names that people can invest in robotics?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at across this, I mentioned Foxconn and Celestica, companies like Nvidia have exposure. Qualcomm, more involved on like that edge compute and processing. And if you think about where we're going with human technology, there's a lot of convergence with sensors, but robots actually are designed to be sensor informed, right? If you think of artificial intelligence, how it's going to act, operate, and sense in the real world involves an entirely different construct of requirements. We have a nervous system, we have organs, we have communication. They have their own set of tools. So as we start to see that play out, we're going to see companies like that involved. Even this quarter, Teradyne, which is involved in semi, we're going to see semi continue to take off for exposure for data centers and embedded intelligence across autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are data centers on wheels with sensors. And so you've got this connectivity play. At the end of the day, it all comes down to physics. And the companies that know how to make the most out of physics, whether it's energy, materials, et cetera, have a competitive advantage. And they're going to continue to grow as a percentage of overall GDP. Right now, majority of GDP is in the real world, not digital services. And these companies are going to have, runway to, as I mentioned again, expand from kind of behind the scenes to robotics as a service themselves. So they're going to start operating in more parts of society. So I really believe that Wall Street is underappreciating the impact AI is going to have on the robotic space. And if you look at valuations, they're still at all like regular historic averages right now for the robotic space overall. If you look at Robo, for example, so we're starting to see this uplift take off, but like the next phase hasn't even started to begin. And so at the end of the day, you're going to get exposure to companies like Coherent, Infineon, even Ubitech, which we added at the latest rebalance. And again, as I mentioned, every quarter we evaluate and score companies based on factors like technical leadership, market leadership, what they're investing in, to give investors opportunity to have exposure to companies they might not be as familiar with.
And what do you think about all the spending that's going on? I mean, is it a must? Because we've seen a lot of circular spending, but in order to stay ahead and have these industries really benefit, I mean, what industries are really benefiting specifically? You've been talking about a lot of them benefiting from the spending. You have to spend in order to grow, right?
Yes and no. I mean, right now we're kind of in this game theory power dynamics where, there is a winner takes all mentality in terms of like what you can build. But obviously on the flip side, we see open source. We see increasingly less expensive models that can do more for less. And that trickles down into society. Everyone will benefit from that at the end of the day. You're going to get cheaper transportation. You're going to get, better materials, better energy dynamics. Healthcare is going to improve. So you're going to have things like AI doctors and autonomous drones that will fly to bring you medical equipment. This will really start to penetrate and integrate into the real world. It'll take time, though. There is a lag period between capabilities and adoption, and that's something to really focus on too. But again, in terms of this, like, let's break it down. Like the CapEx so far has been mainly into data centers, and that's projected to grow. I mean, we're up 90% year over year, I believe. And that's not projected to slow down. And in fact, we've seen comments from Zuckerberg and others on increased spending next year. That's pulling through the areas like robotics, and that'll trickle down into other areas. But again, it's also disruptive to a lot of SaaS players, for example. And so I think we're getting more confident around companies that have an advantage with increasingly less expensive compute, increasingly less expensive intelligence for decision making. The simulations, not just increase individual robot capabilities, but fleets and swarms of robots. So again, we believe and are really excited that this is one of the most exciting opportunities in play right now. And there's lots of runway. I mean, if you look at the year 2040, we're going to have humanoids in our homes. You can already pre-order some for next year. And again, we're still very early in that, right? Like first generation deployment. So it'll only continue to get better. And I think one of our advisors, and we've talked about this a lot, we're going to transition from automotive leases to robotic leases in households, and so that's going to be global, right? So that's a huge market on its own, huge supportive system around it. But again, just really exciting time to be in.
Yeah, and I met a robot out here, and it could jump 4 feet straight in the air. It ran, I forget, so fast in just a few seconds, but it was over $60,000. So, they're going to have to get that price down if everybody wants one. This will be like our Tesla moment. We need a more affordable one. Zeno Mercer, great to see you. They'll come down, I'm sure, like everything does, right? Senior research analyst at VettaFi. Zeno, great to chat with you. Thank you so much.